Yeah, yeah. So this is part one on the generations of America. Okay? I've already covered the 9 generations of America, starting from the dates of 1883 to 2039. The lost generation, the greatest generation, the silent generation, the baby boomers generation, the Generation X generation, millennials generation, Generation Z, Generation Alpha, Generation Beta. We covered that Malcolm X and MLK was from the silent generation, as well as Minister Louis Farrakhan. They all come from the silent generation, which we covered is the greatest generation of African Americans. We also covered the prophet is the one that revealed that to present African American community so that they can understand my rank and my place. Because it ain't nobody else doing it. When I'm doing something that ain't nobody else doing, you think I ain't gonna point that out? Or is it arrogance to point that out? Or is it rank to point it out? I think it's rank. I think it's me showing you my rank. While you walk around here, it like you in my lane. Come on, man. Come on. Man. See, I'm telling you how you sized me up. You sized me up like I was a delinquent. Like I'm a little delinquent out here. I'm 45 years old, man. I got a son that's 19 years old down in Florida. I'm a grown man, buddy. I'm a grown man. See, what you didn't realize is I got a child in the world. I got a son in the world just like you. Oh, you didn't realize that, did you? Why you playing with me like I'm a 20-year-old delinquent? Okay? No, you got to point these things out, bro. Because people will sit back and listen to the information, but ignore you. The person that's telling them this information, not, and listen, they'll go back to playing with me and playing in my face. Oh, I'm lying about it? Oh, they won't go back to playing in my face after I made this message. One of the most important understanding messages of understanding who is the greatest generation of African Americans. Won't they go back to playing in my face if I don't show my rank? See, this is a military understanding. You see what I'm doing, right? I'm getting these lames out my way. I'm getting these people who think they're in my lane out my way, bruh. And I'm proving it with credible information and intellectual property. If you have not done this, if you didn't know the greatest generation, that's important. That's very important. If you claim to be pro-black, I expect you to know who is the greatest generation. I expect you to know. You shouldn't be stumbling over your, well, we don't, I think, that's what you're going to say, I think, ain't you? I think, right, listen, man. Let's just be honest, man. See, listen, the prophet is a general. You a buck private. Okay, you might be a drill sergeant. You might be a drill sergeant. I'm a general. And I'm placing, if you don't understand what I'm doing, if you are let's put it like this, if you are a conservative person, a conservative worldview type of person with conservative worldviews, even in Christianity, you might think I'm being arrogant. You might think this is carnal. You might think a lot of things. But I'm going to explain my position. If you listen close, if you're ever confused about my messages, all you got to do is listen for the clarity. I guarantee you anything I'm talking about, I clarify according to being a man of God. If you listen long enough, You might hear my testimony, you might hear me talking about stuff, but then you're gonna hear the clarity of why I'm talking about it. But if you take sound bites that you want to hang on to, okay, then you gonna walk away forming your own narrative that God will hold you responsible for it. Just be careful. Just be careful. You know what I mean? This way I place rank is in a military format and fashion. I'm placing everybody in rank in America. Right? That's what I'm doing when I do this and when I say this. It's a military action. In any military, there's a military action of placing everyone in rank. And we're not going to let suckers and lames act like ace 5-star generals, 4-star generals. Why? Because you did a felony? Color body? Listen, buddy, you ain't no general out here, bruh. You a goon, you a soldier. I'm a general. You understand the difference? See, the general is the brains behind the war. You follow me, right? Okay. You couldn't figure out how to do it, could you? I did. That's called a general. Ask any veteran. If you figured out how to do it, how you ain't a general? Militarily speaking, you figured out how to do it. How are you not a general? But listen, it sounds cool to say it, but it's people that live it. Okay, well, with the Americans, all they did, they was talking about what I was. They thought I was a pedophile or whatever. I showed you they was marrying children. How am I not a general when that intellectual property and how I crafted it, right? It defeated the whole community. So if my strategy worked on defeating these people, because like I will also tell you, I'm one of the only black men that defeated the value system of the white racist Americans. You show me another one that did it. Oh, if you telling me racist, he knows he's racist. He don't care about that. You didn't beat him like that. Man, listen. You don't beat racist white America telling them they racist. They know they racist. So for all people who produced intellectual property that was just going on and 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 on about racist people, you didn't beat them. You thought you beat them, didn't you? Listen. To all respect to the past, nobody did what I did. Malcolm X and MLK did not beat the value system. Listen, keywords. The value system of the racist white Americans. No, they did not. Well, everything they said, they knew. They knew what they was doing. They knew all the stuff they was doing. Think about that. You see what I'm saying, right? They did not actually successfully beat the value system of the racist white Americans. I am the only one in modern day time that has beaten the value system of racist white America. You know how I did it? I'm the only one that showed them that you marrying children. Listen, buddy, listen. You marrying children. That white man care about them children. That racist white man care about them children. So I didn't just stop it showing him how racist he is or whatever. Oh, I covered it, buddy. Oh yeah. Come on. I got to cover it. But I mean, it's obvious. But it's an elephant in the room. But it always is going to be an elephant in the room. But I went on to attack his value system. In order to attack his value system, you have to successfully attack something that he actually cares about as a racist white man. What did you attack that he actually cares about in his value system? Show me one person that successfully attacked his value system And he was a racist white man in a racist, collective racist white community of America. Show me what you attacked. You know what I attacked? You marrying these children. You marrying these children. I know racist white Americans care about that. And I know they didn't know about it because half of us Americans didn't know about it. So if you try to point out people that knew about it, the bottom line is most of us didn't know about it. You ain't know about us marrying no children in America, and these racist white people didn't. So then I beat him when I opened my mouth, unlike the past, unlike the present. I beat him in things he valued. I beat him in his value system. Oh, I know he cares about these children. It's at the top of his value system. It's at the top of his value system. Oh, children ain't at the top of these value systems of these racist white Americans. If you listen to them, that's all they talk about. Our children and our generations and our families and our white children. Well, you was marrying white children as Americans. You was marrying white children as Americans, dating back to the 1800s. I just stopped at 1929. You've been marrying children since 1929, and guess what? You never stopped. You never stopped marrying children. You show me why nobody pointed it out. Nobody pointed it out. So I'm the only one that successfully defeated the value system of the racist white Americans and the Americans. Oh, won't you tell military they served in the country, they served for a country that marries children. Won't you tell veteran military that did tours all over the world, why don't you tell them that they've been marrying children in the United States? The prophet outranks everybody. And don't even think it's close. Ain't nobody close. Now, crack cocaine is where we're getting to, because we're going to start talking about what the baby boomers did as a generation. They destroyed the black baby boomers, destroyed black America. Oh, I can show you what generation of black people that did it. We talked about the greatest generation. Now here's the balance. We're going to talk about what the whole video and messages is about. The baby boomers that destroyed black America. It wasn't all black people. Malcolm X his generation didn't do it. They destroyed America. MLK's generation destroyed America. No, it didn't. So why are we going to say black people? I'm not going to say black people. I'm going to say the baby boomers that were black people. But you see the difference between just saying black people? No. No, everybody wasn't out there destroying this country. It was the baby boomers destroying the country. You see how different that hits? It hit different, don't it? How the young people say, it hit different, don't it? When I tell you, it wasn't all black people that destroyed America. It ain't all of us that destroyed America. No, it was the baby boomers generation. It wasn't all black people, because if you go back further, you're going to bump into the silent generation right after the baby boomers, and that's Malcolm X and MLK's generation. How they the ones that destroyed America and black people? So then, what generation did it? What generation did it? I'm going to tell you what generation did it. It was the generation directly after the Malcolm X and MLK generation. It was the baby boomers generation. They the ones that destroyed black community. And so we're going to go through some information about black baby boomer generation and how they destroyed the black community. It wasn't every community. It wasn't all black people. And we're quick to point it out. But we never break it down by generation and place the liabilities with each generation. Every generation has liabilities. My generation has liabilities. The millennial, the Generation Z got liabilities. Generation Alpha, what, 15? They starting to get some liabilities. They getting there. But every generation has liabilities. That's how it works, because all of us are humans, right? We all got liabilities with each generation. That's just what it is. So the proper chief will differentiate all the liabilities by by generation of the tribe. By generations of the tribe, the chief will come in and say, this generation is liable for this history. This generation is liable for that history. This generation is liable for this, that, and the third. Not all generations are liable for this. No, this generation was liable for this. And that's what I'm showing you. It's a certain generation that was liable for the destruction of the black community in America. It was the baby boomers generation. That's who did it. So crack came out in 1981, like I told you, when I was born. Baby boomers were between 35 and 17. They were between 35 years old and 17. See, what I'm going to start doing, what I want you to do, and what I'm going to do on this message is I want you to place all history of what happened and the ages that the people were when these things happened. So when crack came out, who was the major players that were old enough to sell drugs? It was the baby boomers. So when crack came out, who was selling drugs? The baby boomers. It's in the younger parts of the silent generation. They a little bit of them were selling drugs in the 70s and a little bit in the 60s. But it had not ravished our community nowhere near what crack cocaine did to our community. And there was no gang banging active. There was not all this killing going on. That came from the baby boomers generation. And I can prove that, not by a biased opinion. I can prove that by the dates of how old people were when crack cocaine and when gang banging was going on. So let's understand this. This is not based on my biased opinion or bitterness or butthurt feelings about baby boomers failing us or whatever. They did fail us as a generation. Let's say that. The baby boomers failed Generation X, the millennials, and all the younger generations of black people. While you blame us, and most old school people blame us and shake their head at us, the baby boomers failed us as black people. And I'm gonna prove that. They was the first ones selling crack, baby boomers. Now, I know it seems like they was too old, right? That's all in your psychology because of the images and things you seen on TV. I want you to look at, listen, you're competent, right? So when you look at any event in your own time, let's just say you want to look up when drive-bys was going on. Drive-bys, what year was drive-bys? We had the most drive-bys in America. What year? There had to be a year that we had the most drive-bys. I would say probably somewhere between the mid-90s, somewhere around in there. Early 90s, mid-90s, somewhere, right? Okay, so who you think who was most responsible for that? The baby boomers, because they were a certain age at that year in the mid 90s. So how could it be us? And how could it be anybody younger than us? Or how could it be anybody older than me? I mean, than the baby boomers. How could it be anybody older than the baby boomers or anybody younger than the baby boomers? It was them. And we based that on the age people was when all this stuff was going on. And the baby boomers were in their prime in the 80s and the 90s. Let's say that again. Let me say that again. Let me say that again. Let me say that again. The baby boomers. The baby boomers were in their prime of life in the 80s and the 90s. Listen, I just clarified everything for you right there. Well, you ain't even got to go look at all the stuff of these dates and all these little different things and everything, these subject matters and everything. I just showed you right there. The baby boomers were in their prime in the 80s and the 90s. Okay? Now, with that being said, what was going on in the 80s and the 90s? You see what I'm saying? You see where I'm going with this, right? We were too young. Generation X, I was too young to be out, to really be the movers and the shakers as far as this drugs and killing and all this stuff going on. My generation was too young. So it wasn't us. So how you going to blame us? So the main movers and shakers during the 80s and the 90s was the baby boomers. They was the ones selling the most crack, the ones selling the most drugs. And I can prove that by the dates of generations. I can prove that by the dates of generations, meaning how old people was at that time. It couldn't have been nobody else. It couldn't have been nobody else to blame. In this case, it's common sense. If crack cocaine came out in 1981, when the baby boomers were between 35 all the way to the youngest 37. That's why I started out old to young, because I started out with the oldest of the baby boomers. That's why I did it backwards instead of saying 17 to 35. Crack came out 1981. Now you know. The baby boomers were between the oldest being 35 in his prime. You telling me that wasn't the ones that was selling crack when crack came out and they was 35 years old? You telling me they wasn't the ones? It came out in 81. You heard me, right? It came out in 81, right? The oldest of the baby boomers were 35. That's the oldest age they were as a generation. The oldest age of the baby boomers when crack came out was 35. The youngest, listen, the youngest of that generation was 17. You telling me between 35 and 17, that ain't who was selling crack when it came out in 1981? Of course. I want you to think about those ages. Let's slow down right here. Let's double park right here. 35 and 17 when crack came out. Between the ages of 35 and 17 years old. You telling me that wasn't who was selling crack when it came out? 35 to 17. That's who was smoking it, doing it, and selling it. Everybody in their 20s, see, they didn't know what it was. So everybody was smoking it, doing it. The baby boomers were actually selling it and doing it. Everybody in their 20s was doing it. I know that. So listen, the first generation of crack addicts was the baby boomers. Now, because the oldest was 35, that was the drug dealers in their prime. You know, when you were a little tough little head honcho in your prime, you know what I'm talking about? At 35, you know what I mean? You're getting out there. So that means that the silent generation had to be involved, because at that time in 81, you still had them older people that were selling drugs. Which means when the crack came out in 1981, you had people that was, 40 years old, 45. See, that when crack came out, anybody that was 45, 40 years old, 36 and up, anybody that was 36 and older when crack came out in the black community, they were the silent generation. So you have to, if you know anything about the streets, you know the further we go back in time, it was these older people that was the head honchos in their 40s and 50s. So then, with that being said, everybody in their 40s and 50s, when in 1981, the ones that's holding the weight, the kilos, that had all the weight in the drugs, we hadn't shifted to letting these younger people have all the weight. You know what I'm saying? So you know how the whole country was. It was these people in their 40s and 50s, more than 50s, going around in that age, where they was the ones holding kilos and all of that, right? So then when crack came out, that still was in place as far as how the old school used to be. And they was the ones that had the weight when crack came out. So then we do give a liability initially when crack came out, because with the silent generation, because they had to be the people holding the weight when it first came out. You follow me, right? It couldn't have been nobody between 35 and 17. It couldn't have been. It couldn't have been nobody between 35 and 17 that was holding all the weight in Chicago, Detroit, and all them places. 35 and 17, no. But you're going to be the ones doing all the selling of the drugs all on the streets. You're going to be the runners. Now, the people holding the weight was the silent generation. That's common sense. If you know anything about the streets, between 36 and up was the ones with the weight, with the kilos, not 35 and down. 35 and down was the baby boomers generation when it came out in 1981. However, the baby boomer generation was the ones out there selling the drugs word of mouth and doing the drugs word of mouth. Make sense? They was the ones out there between 35 and 17. They the ones flooding the streets, not somebody in their 50s, even though they holding the weight, even though they holding the kilos and stuff from the cocaine. You know what I'm saying? Cause see, they was just coming into cooking the crack. So this is, you know, crack came on the scene where there was people in their 40s and 50s with big kilos of just cocaine. They seen what was going on and they shifted to the crack. They shifted to crack cocaine, right? Okay, so, you know, but they wasn't the ones running the streets in 81 at 40, 50 years old. You know, no, not really. They were slowing down about after they 40s. You know what I'm saying? But the baby boomers in 1981 was 35 to 17. That's everybody in the streets right there. 35 to 17. That was the baby boomers generation when crack came out. They were that whole generation. I'm giving you the dates of the whole entire generation. You understand, right? So this is the dates I'm telling you from 35 to 17 is all people born into that generation. The ages of everybody at that time in 1981 was 35 to 17. That was the baby boomers generation when crack came on the scene. Then they was the recipients of it, meaning they was the main ones using it, because they looked at it like crack was cocaine, not cocaine was crack. You know what I'm talking about. They didn't know crack was crack. They thought crack was just cocaine, smokable cocaine, until it rocked their life. No pun intended. You know, it rocked their life. Them rocks rocked their life. But remember the first generation of crack that did crack, they didn't even know what they was doing. So then 20-year-olds thought it was cool to do crack cocaine at the first, initially, which means everybody born between 35 and 17, which was the baby boomers at that time, they thought it was cool, so they was the main ones doing it. And they was the main ones out there selling it. But the people that had the weight to distribute it, the people that distributed the crack by weight was the silent generation. The people that distributed the crack by kilos, cooking the birds, as people would say it, that was the silent generation that was responsible for distributing birds of crack if you will. But the runners and the hustlers were the baby boomers. So they was the one, even though I have to say it, even though the liability comes as far as the silent generation for holding the weight in distributing the birds of cocaine, of crack, the runners and the movers and the users and the ones running around the streets going crazy for it and selling it for the older generation, which was the silent generation, was the baby boomers. So they was the one that was doing the most destruction. But then you still got to put the liability physically. I would say manually they was doing the most destruction. How about that? Manually they was doing the most destruction. And basically that's what people going to really look at. They was the ones going to jail. They were baby boomer generation when that crack came out. They was the one going to jail. They were the one going to jail for using and selling it. Mostly people was being locked up was baby boomers. I guarantee you that. The silent generation was sitting back in the cut selling birds of it, selling birds, cooking birds. You know, so manually the baby boomer generation was the most liable, manually, hands-on, out in the streets, either selling it and using it, being that they were between the ages of 35 and 17. That's all who was out there. 17 is the perfect age when you first really getting on the scene, right? And then 35, by that time, you like I said, you a little head honcho, you know what I'm saying? You got some weight, you're a little head honcho, you got some weight on you in the streets. 35, that's all your 20s is gone in the streets. Now you 35. You telling me you ain't gonna be the ones out there hustling? Of course. I want you to think about all their 20s gone, the baby boomers. When the oldest of the baby boomers, the oldest person the oldest people in the baby boomer generation were 35 when it came out. Okay, all their 20s is gone, but they've been in the streets, right? In the streets all their 20s. Now they 35. You telling me they ain't gonna be the ones that selling the drugs? They've been in the streets all their 20s. They're gonna be the ones selling crack. So they was the first ones out there. You see what I'm saying? Selling it and using it. Manually, hands-on. It was definitely the baby boomers. Now, this is important information. I think, like, if you are a drug dealer, and I do not condone that. I do not condone that lifestyle whatsoever. Let's just say you used to be a drug dealer. Also, I think you should know when cocaine came to America. That's just an interesting fact that a drug dealer would sit back and talk about. You know the type. But I guarantee you, if you ask most drug dealers, when cocaine came to America, I don't know, man. I don't know. It used to be in Coca-Cola. Hey, ain't that what we're gonna say? They used to put coca leaf extract in Coca-Cola. Cocaine came to America December 1898. That's when cocaine came to America. December 1898. 1898 is when cocaine came to America officially. Now, if you want to go talk about some random stuff, some little conspiracy theory stuff, where it could have got snuck in and we could have been doing something here and there, nah. I'm not going to do that. Okay? One thing you'll notice about me, I pride myself on this. You will never hear no conspiracy theories from these pages that I have. I don't do conspiracy theory because I don't have any confidence in something I don't really know. I only speak about things that I can talk about confidently, and the only way I feel you can talk about confidently in front of intelligent people is if you know that it's fact. If you know that it's fact, how if you don't know it's fact, how can they say you a pedophile and they don't know it's fact? How can they talk about it confidently? Everything I talk about, I can talk about it confidently because I know it's fact, right? In the context and the narrative that um I'm portraying it to be, that I'm projecting it to be. It's going to be, I'm gonna be confident because I know the narrative that I'm projecting is fact. December 1898 is when cocaine came to America. December 1898 is when cocaine came to America. Now, once again, if you didn't know this and you the streets should have knew that. No, I mean, why not? It's not being a nerd. Listen, I'm gonna teach you that a nerd. Let me tell you what a nerd is. A nerd is somebody who has, who obsesses, who masters a certain subject. You don't understand the difference between an intelligent person and a nerd. A nerd obsesses over a certain element. A nerd will tell you that. Well, how you a nerd and you don't know what you're a nerd of? You have to be a nerd of something. A nerd of movies, a nerd of just different stuff. Music, you could be a music nerd, you could be a war nerd. But a nerd obsesses basically and masters a certain subject. So if I was a nerd, I would be a nerd of warfare. But then again, we all are nerds if we, based on something we prefer to think about and master and study out of preference. But I'm gonna show you how to be cool and intelligent. I appeal and I'm intelligent. See, some people think you can't appeal and be cool and be intelligent. See, that's how our culture teach each other. No, you can be cool and go, especially today with your phone, and Google stuff, random stuff, and just know it. And just know stuff, and people don't know. And you, and in return, you're cooler than everybody. You're more cool. Well, I didn't know that. Cocaine came to America in December 1898 when it was cold. That's a bad, eerie omen, ain't it? Probably with snow on the ground everywhere. No pun intended, snow on the ground everywhere. Wasn't that an eerie omen? December 1898 is when cocaine came to America. Came like hell. You see that? It came in the winter, going into the winter. If it wasn't already winter. Winter starts usually December 20th or 21st. So it might have came a little bit before winter, but it probably was already getting cold. Pretty sure it was. Pretty sure it was cold, especially up north. Way up north, it probably was already cold. Look at the omen of that. It didn't come in the summertime when everybody was drinking and everything. No, it came when it was getting cold. December 1898 is when cocaine came to America. Now, freebasing cocaine was basically pre-cocaine, if you will. Freebasing cocaine was ammonia, ether, and cocaine together. See, initially I didn't even know that. I heard about freebasing, and you know what I actually thought? I thought freebasing was just an attempt to smoke cocaine without it being solid with baking soda in it. I thought it was an attempt. That's what I thought freebasing was. Just like basically putting cocaine in the pipe and just smoking it without it being rocked up. This is the thoughts I had when I was younger. But freebasing was actually ammonia, ether, and cocaine together, and it came out in 1974. Freebasing was going on in 1974. Okay? So, there you have it. That's the beginning of showing you these dates. And I want you to go back and look for yourself. I want you to go back and put dates together. How you do it is you follow these 9 generations and you will find their place at that time of event. So, for example, like 9/11, what happened in New York City with the trade centers. You can go by each generation and see how old people were at that time. And this is how you go through the dates of ages and see, okay, this person was born into the baby boomer generation, so they were born 1945. So, and then you find out their age at that time when 9/11 happened. And then it shows you their place at that time in history. And this is how you figure out who's liable, who was thinking what, and who was doing what. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so I'm going to come back with part 2 like I thought I would have to. You know what I'm saying? You can't get this all into one message. But yeah, freebasing cocaine was ammonia. They had ammonia in there, man. Ammonia, ether, and cocaine, and it came out in 1974. See, that was 7 years before crack came on the scene. That was 7 years. They were freebasing 7 years before crack came on the scene. And like most people would tell you, man, they believe a scientist basically put crack together because it had to be a person that understood science. You couldn't have a dummy that even thought they could do it. But freebasing was where they was already experimenting. You know what I'm saying? That was like pre-crack, basically. You know what I'm saying? But a lot of people believe some type of scientist. I ain't gonna say he white. It could have been somebody black. But it basically was science, because how you know is because, first of all, if you don't know what crack is, it's cocaine and baking soda. That's how it used to be. I say it like that. That's how it used to be, right? For the most of the golden age of crack cocaine, it was cocaine and Arms and Hammer in America. That's it. That's all it was. It was cocaine and baking soda. Most drug dealers understand the science of crack cocaine, which is basically the baking soda is only, its sole purpose is to make cocaine a solid. That's the only purpose. There's no other purpose. Baking soda don't get you high. It don't. In fact, how we know it was science is because it's completely pure. Baking soda is completely pure, which means I could put this in the cocaine and make it a solid, and I'm only getting an effect of cocaine and nothing else. That's science. All I need basically is an element. This is how this person had to think, like a scientist. All I need is an element to make this hard, but it has to be pure, not with a chemical in it. It's got to be something pure, but it can make it hard and hold it all together, and all I'm going to get is the effect of cocaine. Genius science. And I when I look back at freebasing cocaine, it could have been just sitting around pondering, playing around freebasing. I kind of think that's what happened. Cause think about it, they was halfway high playing around ammonia, ether, and cocaine. Think about it, and somebody probably might have just stumbled on, well, all we need is something to make it solid, but it has to be pure. And I can imagine back in those times, man, people just sat around and thought about these type of things, in the 70s and everything, going into the 80s. You can see black people sitting around thinking about, yeah, man, we just need something, halfway high from what they're doing, the freebasing. We just need something to make it solid. And then look how white baking soda is. They probably might have mixed it together. It might have been a fluke. I'm gonna stretch it by putting a little bit of cocaine. They might have did it like that. Just putting it in there, I'm gonna stretch it a little bit. I'm gonna mix this cocaine with this baking soda and just stretch it to the users. It might have started out innocently like that. I'm gonna stretch this to the users and mix it up in there real good. And I'm gonna stretch cocaine to my customers like that. And then they might have thought, well, water might have got on it one day and it kind of got a little hard, right? They might have thought, man, I probably could smoke this. Look at this, I probably could smoke it. You know what I'm saying? 'Cause mind you, they already playing with freebase cocaine. I think basically they might have stumbled on making crack. Let's just look at another theory. Even though I ain't no conspiracy theorist, they might have stumbled on it playing around with the already having the idea of freebase and playing around freebase. And then when they was probably stretching it with the cocaine, with the baking soda to probably sell it to customers, it got a little wet. They was already playing around freebasing. And they thought, well, let's smoke this too. We smoking freebase, let's smoke this. I think that's kind of how it might have happened. Or either someone that understands science, and understood, all I need is something that makes it solid, but that it has to be pure, where I only get the effect of cocaine, So, but like I said, man, at that time when it came out, 1981, the year I was born, the baby boomers were 35 and 17. Between the years of 35 and 17, that was the whole generation of baby boomers. Ain't no way in the world you could tell me they wasn't the ones out here active. If you know anything about how the game go, you know they was active out here. So they was the ones that was manually destructive when cocaine came out. When crack cocaine came out. When crack cocaine came out in 81, the baby boomers generation was the ones that was the most manually destructive. Which proves my point. The baby boomers generation was the ones that destroyed the African American community and America at large. Not just limited to one race of people. I believe if you look at all the history of this country, it was the baby boomers generation. I'm just breaking down right now because, I feel like it's important because I'm black and because my listeners, many of them may be black, that it's important to understand which generation destroyed the black community. It was the baby boomers generation. That's who did it. And I proved it right here with who was what age when crack came out. The baby boomers was in their primes. So how it wasn't them that destroyed the community with crack cocaine when they was in their prime, between 37 and 35. 17 and 35. 17 and 35 is the prime. That's definitely your prime. Can we all agree on that? Whenever you decide to pick what number you want to pick in there, between 35 and 17 is your prime as a human being. So they was the ones in their prime. The baby boomers were in their prime when crack cocaine came out. How you gonna tell me it wasn't them? They was the ones that was the most physically destructive. You know what I'm saying? So they was the ones most manually destructive when crack cocaine came out. The baby boomers generation. So that's one PowerPoint where I prove that it was the baby boomers generation that was responsible for destroying the black community. Of our tribe of black people, it was the baby boomer generation who was out there in their prime when crack cocaine came out. And we all know it ain't no secret. Crack cocaine is the drug that did the most damage to the black community. Whether it was the drug itself or the gun violence and all the stuff that was going on that came with it. So the people that was the most active and in their prime, definitely those who were in their prime, was the baby boomers. So then, therefore, we have to give them the overall liability. You know, the most destructive part of the liability. The most destructive part of the liability being that they was the most hands-on, being in their prime. They was the ones that were most instrumental with destroying the black community with crack cocaine, which makes them the most destructive generation of black community. There is no more destructive community than the baby boomers of the black community. That was the most destructive. That is the most destructive generation. That's the ones that destroyed this community with crack cocaine. They was the most hands-on. They was in their prime. How it wasn't them. So we was too young. In 81, I was just born. So it couldn't have been it couldn't have been Generation X. So it had to be the baby boomers. You see what I'm saying, right? Yeah. So, you know, I'm just showing you which generation of our tribe, which generation of African Americans, which generation of African Americans destroyed our community the most. It was them. It was the baby boomers. See, when you break it down to liability, to generations, you put the liabilities where they belong. You put the liabilities where they belong. You don't say, oh, it was just all of us. It wasn't. I was too young. How was us? How was it my generation? And everybody else was getting older. And I'm glad I thought about this. The baby boomers only got older, which means they became the silent generation was the first when the crack came out. They was the people holding the weight. The more time went by after crack came out, they took the silent generation's position of holding the birds and the kilos. So the more time went by, baby boomers got older from their prime to being the ones out there manually destroying the community to the ones actually holding the kilos. So the baby boomers only got worse with destroying our community to the point where they was now the big dogs. They was the ones with the weight. They started out, when it first came out, they was between 35 and 17. They only got older, which means they only got more rank in the streets. With time going by, they got more rank, which means ultimately the baby boomers became more destructive, proving my point. They was the ones that destroyed our community as far as how crack cocaine, that format, going that direction of destruction. They was the ones responsible for it, man. The more time went by after it came out, they began to be, now like I said, the silent generation, they the ones started out as the youngest of them, the youngest of the silent generation. Not all the silent generation. You got to look at the dates. But the youngest of the silent generation, they was the ones that, I would say about to halfway of the silent generation, down to the youngest, they was the ones that held the weight, the kilos and everything. But they got older. As they got older, the movers and the shakers, the baby boomers on the streets, they took over. They were like, we were the ones out here and everything. Think about it. With time, they the ones that took over, got the kilos, and with time, as time went by, they became the movers and the shakers. By what? By 2001, the oldest of the baby boomers were 55. So 55 is that age, I'm telling you, that sweet spot. They was the ones that was now by 2001, the baby boomers. Let's go to the millennial. By 2001, the oldest baby boomers were 25 and the youngest baby boomers were 37. You telling me that wasn't the ones holding the weight by 2001? By 2001, now the baby boomers, as far as the crack game goes, they the ones that got all the weight, all the birds, all the kilos. Being that they was between the ages of 55 and 37. So let's review. In 2001, that's way past the 90s, all the worst part of the crack, right? 2001, 20 years later after crack came out, 1981 to 2001, that's 20 years. Mind you, they started out with being 35 to 17 in 1981. 20 years later, they all gonna be 20 years older. They was between the years of 55 and 37, which means now 55 and 37, they the ones holding the weight. Think about it. 55 to 37, that's everybody holding the kilos and the birds by 2001. So by 2001, the baby boomers were holding all the weight in the game. And you can assume by late 90s, they was already moving into that position. You could even say by mid 90s, they was already moving in that position. So, as you can see, they only got older and held the full throne of crack cocaine. As they got older, they claimed the full throne of the streets, which makes them the most destructive generation of African Americans to our community. You know what I'm saying? We have to put the liabilities where it belongs. And like I said, it's not limited to just white people, black people. I mean, if you look at through all the stuff that happened from people that was born during 1946 to 1969. 1946 to 1964, excuse me. 1964. Okay, so let's clarify this. Baby boomers, I gave you real dates already, right? How old they was. Their ages were from 1946 to 1964. So from 1946, I'm clarifying this, the baby boomers generation was from 1946 to 1964. My pen looked like, can you see this? It looked like right here, let me see. Right here, you see where my finger is? Doesn't it, where my finger is, don't that look like a 9? It's backwards, but can't you see it? Where my finger is? I thought that was a 9. That's actually a 4. Okay, so the baby boomer generation was from 1946 to 1964, which that's only 5 years off. And the dates is still accurate with 34, with 35 and 17 when crack cocaine came out. All those dates are accurate. Everything I said is accurate. It's just that I broke down the baby boomers generation part 1 and part 2. There's part 1 and part 2, and then I seen on the other side that the 4 was actually the 9 was actually a 4. So it's more clear on this side. There's 2 parts of the baby boomer generation. Baby boomer 1 and baby boomer 2. Baby boomer 1, and I'm glad, I think this is perfect information to actually clarify all of this anyway, because I actually forgot about this part. And I think it's good to put it on this actual video. Baby boomer 1, there's baby boomer generation is broken down to 2 parts. So that just clarifies all of this anyway. And you would have went on and seen it anyway, that it was 1964, from 1946 to 1964. So there's part 1 and part 2. Baby boomer 1, the first part of the generation is from 1946 to 1954. Baby boomers second half is 1955 to 1964. So again, the baby boomers generation is from 1946 to 1964. Okay? So now you get it. Now you see. From 1946 to 1964. But even if you heard how I ran through all the generations, when I started out Generation X started out 1965 to 1984. So you would already knew when I talked about 1969, actually with my information that Generation X, 1969 was in Generation X, because I showed you that 1965 starts Generation X to 1984. So you would have, if you would have heard the information, you would have knew what it was and how to place it anyway. But I'm glad I got to clarify that, before I finish the video. There's two parts, more specifically, that there's two parts of the baby boomer. It's classified as two parts. No other generation is classified as two parts. So I'm glad I actually put that information in here. So it's part 1 and part 2 of baby boomers generation. The first part is from 1946 to 1954. And I didn't even know if I had this information on here. I got it. Part 2 is from 1955 to 1964. So baby boomer part 1 is from 1946 to 1954. Part 2 of baby boomers generation is from 1955 to 1964. Okay, yeah. So once again, baby boomers generation is from 1946 to 1964. Baby boomers generation is from 1946 to 1964. So you can look up those dates and see where they were all throughout the history of America. You can see where they was throughout all the history. Throughout all the history, you can see where they was. And you can see their place, and you can see what they did wrong, and you can see what they were responsible for. Like I talked about with the cocaine. Like I said, everything else was accurate. Just because I mistake that 9 for a 4, it really does like that 4 for a 9. Nothing else falls out of place, because that Generation X date will show you that 1969 was actually in Generation X. 1969 was in Generation X, obviously, because the dates were 1965 to 1984. So I covered that, so you would have knew listening where 1969 was. You know what I'm saying? So, like I said, once again, baby boomers was 1946 to 1964. So, I'm gonna come back with part 2 to clarify some furthermore things about baby boomers and how they were destructive to our community and everything, and placing the liability where it properly belongs. It wasn't everybody, it was a certain generation. Okay, so to God's true people, salute. Over and out.